Hello, everybody. Nice to have you all back this week. As promised, we're going to start with discussing the homework. And of course, as always, if you have any questions also about the homework, go ahead and post them in the comments. And if that's not possible for you, then just go ahead and post them on the Discord channel and I'll see them later. So, first of all, what are we going to do today? Well, for today, we are going to be writing more complex scripts, and this is going to be quite a big step compared to last week. So don't worry if this is a lot to digest. It is a lot, it's normal, and we're here to help you. So if you have any questions or you get stuck, please reach out and I will help you. And I've seen already that on the Discord channel, there's so many friendly people available. So if you answer questions of others, that's great. Thank you so much for that. And if you ask your questions, chances are that I'm not even the one to be responding, but that one of your peers will be responding to you. So we're going to talk today about the objects and arrays. We'll see multiple values like how to store multiple elements in just one variable. And we do so using arrays and objects. And we're going to be working with logic statements. So we're going to see if statements and we're going to be seeing loops. And then after I've done my demos, it's going to be time for you to do exactly this. But first, let's quickly go over the homework so that you have an idea of what we did last week. So let me end my presentation. This is actually the last exercise, so I'm going to be duplicating this one. And share my screen. There we go. So let me move over to the comments section. Thank you so much, David. So he pointed out the link of the Discord channel again. So if you aren't on there yet, please just go ahead and use this link to get there. All right. So one of the exercises last week was to go ahead and create a little program that asks for the user's username and then prints to the console hello and then the inputted name. Well, if you remember correctly, we could ask for the username using prompts. So you can say prompt and then just ask, what's your name? But right now, it will ask, but the answer will get lost. So we need to store the answer in a variable like this. And then here on the next line, I could go ahead and use this name for a console log statement. So I could say console log, and then I can type here hello followed by the name. So I can either go ahead and do it like this, well, like this to be more precise, or use the automatic concat and go for this one. So I'm going to do this. Let's go and say, what's your name? It's Micah. And then it says, hello, Micah. So this is the first exercise. If there's anything unclear about this, please just go ahead and post it in the comments and I'll have a look. If you want to reply to this later, just put it in the Discord channel and have a look then. So the answers to this question are actually also going to be posted with the slides for this week, so don't worry if you haven't seen it yet. So we also had the question, what are the types of the variables listed below? Verify this with the type of. Well, I'm not going to do all of them, but I'm just going to show you how to do this. So one of them, for example, was this one, the string, and then it was Lawrence. There we go. So string one is Lawrence. How to determine the type? Well, we can do so using the type of operator. And we're going to be logging the result right away so that we can actually see what the type is. So I'm going to say type of string one. And as you can see, it's a string. We also had, well, I think the most interesting ones are probably the undefined one, this one, and the other one that's interesting is probably the null value, this one. I'm gonna be lazy and copy this over. Oh, and then change this one to value 1 and change this one to value 2. So the type of undefined is actually undefined. That makes sense, right? But what might be actually more interesting to know is that the type of null, I've mentioned this last week, is actually object. Whereas it's pretty much null is not an object, but it's meaning there is no object, but the type of JavaScript, if you ask for it, it's an object. So yeah, it's just a silly thing of JavaScript that null is defined as an object. And then we had the last one, which I had open already because it would be a lot of typing. And this is actually also the most difficult one. So don't worry if this takes some time to digest. So the first point here is that we had to create all these variables, remember? So the first point was create 3 variables containing a number. Well, I did so on line 1 up until 3. And then this was more interesting. On line 5 to 7, I'm doing all the updates that were required using the assignment operators. And assignment operators are the ones like these, so plus equals. So I'm saying A plus equals B, meaning A equals E plus B. And then I'm doing the same here, but then with divide and with the modulus over there. And then I'm logging the results, and you can see them right here. Well, clearly your results can be very different because I just chose some numbers. If you've chosen different numbers, you'll get different results. But this is what you should have done based on the instructions. Let me go ahead and see if there's anything going on in the comments. I don't think so, so let me assume this is all clear so far. So then let's move over to this week's topics because they're actually quite lovely. First of all, we're going to start with the JavaScript multiple values. So meaning that we're going to have a look at arrays and their properties, but also the methods that are available on arrays. And maybe we're also going to see the multidimensional arrays. If I don't mention to go through this, it will be in the homework, so there's no escaping. And then we're going to have a look at objects in JavaScript. And this is actually usually quite a big step. So as I already mentioned, don't worry if today is a lot, because this is a lot to digest if you're a first-time programmer. And then after that, we're going to be seeing some working with objects and arrays. And actually in the exercises today, you're also going to be working with objects and arrays. So there's no escaping this really, but let's just start with them. So let me get my browser back. There we go. And maybe I can organize my other screen so that I can actually see what's going on in the comments. That would be helpful. There we go. Yes. Okay, so let me do some live coding here to show you some objects and arrays. And again, just like last week, I'm going to be sending you these examples over afterwards. So let's start with an array. Chances are you haven't even heard this word before yet, so you may be wondering, what even is that? Well, an array is just a type in which we can store multiple values, and these values, they can be retrieved using their index. So for now, just think of a list of items that you can maybe have, well, maybe our to-do list could be an array. So let's just go ahead and create one to-do list here. So let's to-do. And then when I'm going to create an array, I'm going to use the square brackets for this. And then in there, I can specify any value. And if I want to specify more than one, I need to do so separating them with a comma. All right, so let's just go ahead and see what our to-do is really going to be looking like. Well, for example, at this point, my to-do would be teaching JavaScript. Also, after the course, I need to remind myself that I should be sending you the resources over. So sending resources could be on my to-do list. And maybe there should be something else on my to-do list, such as answer questions. And right now, I have actually created an array containing 3 values. This one, and this one. And let me show you what happens if we're going to be printing this. So I'm going to say console log, and then I'm going to put the to-do in there. And then as you can see, it contains all the values in one go. Well, as I already mentioned, they are indexed, meaning that they have a number. And they always have the number that associates them with the order that they are on the array. And which is common in computer science, but less so for humans, that we start counting with 0. So the index of the first element is actually going to be 0. So if I only want to print the first element, I would be saying this to do, then square brackets, and between the square brackets, I can put the index. Then now you can see there's no square brackets anymore. This is really going to take the value out of the array, and it's no longer um, an array at this point. It's really just the string value. So also if I were to say type of here, you can see it is a string. All right. So these are the ultimate basics of arrays, so to say. Well, we can actually do quite a bit more with it. So for example, if we want to store different types of elements on it, we can. And this is actually uncommon for many languages. So if you do know other languages already, you may think this is, well, an interesting choice, so to say. But we could not only store these on it, but I could, for example, also store a number on here. So 42, for example. And then right now, if I'm going to be printing the third element, remember 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, actually the fourth element, but the third index, then this is going to be returning a number, and the type is also going to be a number. So the elements on the array can be of different types. Well, if this is your first language, it's normal to you. If this is your second language, it might just not be normal to you. So far, we can create an array with the square brackets. We can access the elements of the array using the index. But there's a lot more to an array. There's also different types of methods that we can call on an array. So for example, if we want to remove the last element from the array, we could use the method pop here. So let me just go ahead and log our to-do over here. And then I'm going to say to-do dot pop like this. Then I'm going to be printing it again. And then let's see what happens. As you can see, this is the first time it's printing it. And now it's containing the 42 still. But after the pop, the 42 is empty. So it's just one of the methods that we can do on an array. And methods, we can recognize them by the braces that are in the back. So the braces in the back actually make this a method. And this is how you can easily see whether we're dealing with either a method or with a variable. Well, in JavaScript, variables can actually contain methods, but that's for later. As long as we don't have the braces at the back, we're not executing the method at least. So this is how we can remove an element. Let's also go ahead and add an element to our array. So we could say to do, some new to do pops up, and I could say I also need to, I don't know, cook dinner, for example. Then if I print it again, you'll see that the cook dinner has been added to the end of the list. This. And you may wonder now, oh, but it looks different. Well, has just to do with the number of characters that's included. Because right now the output console just thought, this is ugly if I put this on one line, so let's format this in a nicer way. Well, it's definitely a nicer way because we can see easily what's on the list or what's on the array. But nothing has changed to the content. So if I were just to add a C, I'm pretty sure it would still fit on one line. Yeah. So just because it got too long, it did the pretty formatting. So here I've shown you how to remove the last element, but we can also remove the first element. I can do so using the shift command here. As you can see, the teaching JavaScript is off my list. It's done. And after this, our to-do looks like this. And this also means shift. All the elements have been shifted. So if I ask for index 0, I would get sending resources back. So let's see what's there more there to show you about arrays. Well, what actually also is interesting to show you is that we can change the element. So if I say to do 1, and then here it would be something like, I don't know, call Pascal. It could be on my to-do list. Then after this, you can see that the second element, index 1, has been changed from answer questions to call Pascal. There you go. So you can also actually change the elements. Oh, and one more. Well, I can keep on going with one more, but I think this is going to be the most important one for now that we need to do still. That's the length one. So we can get the number of elements in our array using the length property. So let me show you. You can say console log and then to-do.length. This will actually print the length of the array, and this does not stand to count from 0. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the length is 4, but the indexes, they're only from 0 to 3. Well, and including 3. So the length is 4. Well, there's actually a lot more to say about arrays. You can make sub-arrays, remove elements in different ways. But for now, I think this should be good enough. Whenever you feel like you want to do something with an array, it's typically there. So make sure to just Google it first. So just go ahead and look for JavaScript array, sub-array, or splits, or all these sorts of things, and you'll actually find your answer out there most of the time. Are there any questions regarding arrays at this point? Not a lot. Well, hello, Nitin. Nice to see you as well. Um, if there are no questions at this point, I actually want to take a step, and I want to talk about the objects next. So let me just go ahead and copy all this to a file. Actually, this was a trick. Okay, good. But let's talk about objects. Oh, my computer is struggling a bit. But I think I will have my cursor back in no time. Yes, there we go. I can move around again. Oh, well, sort of. Yes, there we go. Oh, nope. It's responding really slow, so my screen is all over the place. Um, okay, so let's handle this with patience. Yeah, scroll slowly. There we go. We got this. Okay, so objects. Um, oh, no, I think, well, let me just check whether this is all still working fine, because I also see my webcam light flashing. Yeah, I think it's fine. Okay, good. So in JavaScript, we can create objects as well. And objects are sort of the solution for when we want to define something that has multiple values. So we have seen arrays just now, but arrays are just a list of values. And sometimes we actually want to have this list to have named values. For example, if you were to create some sort of person-like object, we would want to give this the properties of a person. So we want to specify a name, maybe a year of birth. We probably also want to specify, I don't know, hobbies, and maybe even, well, actually, we can specify anything. But we do need to do this in the right way. So we cannot do this using an array, not really nicely at least, because if we use an array, they're not named. We can only retrieve items by their index. But with objects, we can actually get items by their key. So let me just show you how to create this person object. Let's just say, I don't know, p equals, and then I'm going to use the curly brackets for this. And I could say something like name, and then, well, let's just create a Mica object and a hobby, which should be coding. And, well, you could think of all sorts of things. And actually, the hobby could also be of type array. So I'm not bound to strings here. So I could also specify the age, which would be a number. So you can create an object like this. So the object pretty much consists of name value pairs. So key value pairs also called. So these are the keys, name, hobby, and age. And these are the values. And it's actually nicer if we go ahead and write it like this with the new lines in there. So now you can easily see what belongs to what. So we can go ahead and access the elements of this object. But let me first show you what this look like if we're going to print it all at once. So log p. So you can see this looks a lot like what I've been typing. But if I would also, oh, I'm sorry, if I would only want to be printing the hobby, I have two options here. I could do this using the array style and then say p hobby, and then it's going to look for the element with key hobby, and when it would return its value coding. But what I could also do is something like this. So I could say p and then dot hobby. And this is actually, well, it's maybe my personal preference, but this is my strongly preferred style to access the elements of the object. So you can see the outcome is the same, but it's just a very different way of writing it. And in a similar fashion, we can also overwrite these elements. So if I were to change my hobby over here, so maybe I decide that coding might be nice, but I actually want to add something to it. So I'm going to be overriding this with an array containing coding and perhaps, I don't know, jigsaw puzzles or something. I'm not too much of an interesting person. So then if I were to print this afterwards, you'd see that my hobby has changed into this array. There we go. These are some of the things that you can do with objects. Um, I'm thinking how much more difficult I should be making this at this point, and I think for now this is difficult enough. So you can go ahead in JavaScript and create variables like we've done in the first class. We can create strings, we can create numbers, we can create booleans, all these things. But we can also create two more complex types now. So we can go ahead and create arrays, which are pretty much just lists of items that can be of different types. And we can create objects, which are a bundle of key value pairs. So there's keys with a name, and they contain a certain value. And you will be working with these a lot if you really dive into JavaScript in a later stage. Just know for now that these hobbies can have, just know for now that these objects can have properties. There's a lot more to it, but I think these basics are good for now. All right, so what's next? Well, we're actually going to be inserting some logic soon, but first I'm going to be copying this over to the examples file. And then let me show you the next topic that we're going to be dealing with. So the next topic that we're going to be dealing with are logic statements. And actually, I don't want to show all of them in this class because it's just going to be a big stream of information and you'll forget all of this. But I just want to mention that there are a few more options. So we're going to be working with if and if else statements here. But you can also expand this and add else if, else if, else if statements to this. We can have the ternary operator and we can work with switch statements. So these last two, please just go ahead and do these in the homework. But this first one, it's so essential and it's such a huge element of coding that I definitely want to be doing this and showing this and explaining this in class. So how does this work? Well, it's pretty much how it's working in language as well. So for example, if the room is dark, I will turn on the light, for example. So there is a certain condition, and if it's true, something will happen. It's also possible that if it's not true, so if it's false, that something else will happen. So there's all sorts of situations that you can think of, and this is actually a construct that you'll be using a lot when coding. So let's just go ahead and see what this looks like when we work with JavaScript. And again, if this is going too fast or you'd like some extra explanation or you get stuck, just let me know and then I'll help you. So let's get REPL back. There we go. I have copied this. Work here now first. So what we're going to do, we're going to be writing an if statement. And this if statement, we need to have a certain condition. So for example, I could create a variable x and say its value is 3, and then say something like if x is smaller than 10, then, well, maybe just log x is smaller and 10. So this is not a mind-blowing example, but it's actually a nice example to understand what's going on here. So at this point, the condition is true because 3 is smaller than 10, and therefore it's going to be using its console log. If I make this bigger, say 13, then it's going to do nothing since x is not smaller than 10 anymore, and it's just going to skip this statement and continue. But if I were to have an else block over here, there is some sort of catch-all. So all other situations that are not the case for this if will be dealt with in this block. So I'm going to be copying this and say x is 10 or bigger. Like this. So if I run this now, you can see that the else block is being executed. So first, let me show you the if block again. So right now, the if block is being executed because this condition is true. So if this is true, this is executed and all the rest is skipped. So after it finds a match, it just continues after the if statement. If this is not true, so if it's false, then it's going to move to the else statement and execute whatever is in there. So this is actually something that you do use a lot. And I just want to expand this a tiny little bit because I also want to add in a else if statement. So instead of having an else here, I could, for example, say if x equals 10. I could say x is 10, and then I could still make an else block for all the other situations. You can actually have as many else if blocks as you like. Let me show you some things. Well, console log x is bigger than 10 here. Make sure to put it in quotes. Okay. So at this point, it is going to be 10. So the second statement is going to be printed x is 10. But I want to see if I can confuse you a little bit. And if not, good for you. So I'm going to do something else here. So I'm going to say if, else if equals 5. Oh, 5. Actually, do not need an else, so I could be done here, but I still want to create an else, so I will add it. I'll say console log x is bigger than 10. So if I change x to 5, you might think, oh, then probably it's going to print x is 5, but this is not how it's working. So it's going to be printing x is smaller than 10. Why? Well, because of what I just mentioned. It's just going to look from the top to the bottom to see if it finds a match. And it does find a match here already. And it's not even going to be evaluating these statements. So it finds a match, does whatever is prescribed in the block, and then it's going to continue at the end of this if-else statement. And this is actually a very, very powerful thing that we can do because, for example, we can also say something like if, and then we can go ahead and first ask for a name. So I can say if name is, well, let's just do what's your name. So just prompt for it. Or, well, who are you? And then store the result in name, and then just say if name is Micah. Oh, we'll just print else it will do whatever we did for the homework. Hi, and then the name. There we go. So if I'm running this, oh, I'm missing something. Oh yes, I am. Not sure what went wrong here, but this is where it should be. It asks, "Who are you?" And I could say Micah. Then it says you again. But if I enter something else, like I don't know, wow, this is a really difficult example. Apparently, I say David. It says hi, David. So this is actually very, very powerful. We can skip certain pieces of code based on conditions. And you will find yourself using this a lot when scripting, especially at the beginning. All right. I don't see any questions or comments, so I'm just going to be assuming that I can continue with the loops. And again, this is a lot. So I'm doing all of this in, I don't know, like 45 minutes to an hour. And it's very well possible that you'll take a day or something to work your way through this to truly understand the concept, having tried everything, getting stuck a few times in infinite loops and stuff like that. But if you're stuck, just reach out. And it's normal to get stuck, especially if you're a beginner. So let's copy all of this over to our example files that I can share that with you afterwards. Now, let's go ahead and create some nice loops. So, what are loops? Well, loops are actually a way of repeating a certain code block a several amount of times. So right now we've seen an if statement, which was working with a certain condition and then executing code block. And a loop is a little bit like that because it's also going to be evaluating a code block based on a certain condition, but it's going to continue to evaluate this certain conditions as long as the condition is true. So if after the code block the condition is still going to be true, it's going to be doing the code block again and again and again and again until the condition becomes false. So there's a few different loops. So some loops do work with conditions like the while loop, the do while loop, and the for loop in a way. But we also have a for in and a for of loop, which are great for working with arrays and objects. So it's good that we've seen these already. So let me show you some loops here. And again, I'm just going to be showing you the basics of loops. So for the details, I am referring to the homework because it's very complete. You can either go ahead and read the prescribed chapters in the book, or you can go ahead and look at all the links, and then you'll get something similar, maybe a bit double, maybe missing a few details, but you definitely grasp the main concepts that are very important here. So let's just go ahead and create a simple while loop to start off with. So for example, if I would be doing a while loop to maybe print a certain value, then I can actually repeat printing this value until a certain condition is no longer true. So how do I do that? Well, it's actually not too difficult. It's just like I'm saying. So it's a while loop. So it starts with the keyword while. Then let's make sure that we have some sort of variable to work with. So just call it I for iteration. Make it start at 0. And then just say, while, I don't know, I is smaller than 1,000 console log I. But if you look at this code, at this moment, it's always going to be smaller than 1,000, so it's going to be printing 0 infinitely. And what we should do in here is actually increase I by 1. So you can say I, or actually let's just do it this way, plus equals 1. Now it's just going to be printing 0 up until including 999. It's not going to be printing 1,000 because 1,000 is not smaller than 1,000. So there we go. It has counted to almost 1,000 in a really, really short amount of time. So while it's being executed, as long as a certain condition is true. If I would say something like this, I want to print this as long as I is bigger than 1,000. Well, in this case, it simply won't print anything. Oh, wait, let me show you. Wait, clear. Oh, clear. That's not a thing. Okay. But at least we have a reference error for reference now. So as you can see, if I run this again, it's not printing anything. If I scroll up, it seems like it did, but it really didn't. It's just the old output that we can see here, which is kind of interesting because it doesn't go as high up, but let's just assume that's a bug of this thing. Because at this point, 0 is never bigger than 1,000, so nothing's being executed, and the script is just done. So that's the while loop. Um, I remember when I was beginning with coding, I used the while loop all the time, and I didn't like the for loop as much. But at this point, it's the other way around. I don't like the while loop as much, and I'm using for loops a lot more. So what can you do in a for loop? Well, in a for loop, you can actually go ahead and specify 3 blocks separated by a semicolon. So this first block here is to initialize a certain iterator. So I'm going to call this one J, and say it's 0 to start off with. And as long as it's smaller than 10, go ahead and do whatever's in the block. And after the iteration, say J++. So this is a weird syntax if you see it for the first time. So it's pretty much first the initialize counter, or it could be anything, but usually it's a counter. The second one is the condition. Oh, wait, let's just do it like this. Condition, and then execute this statement after the code block. So this is the order of things. So it's going to get into this line, then it's going to be executing this. Next, check this condition. Then it's going to be executing all the contents of the block, and afterwards it's going to do this. So in this case, increase j by 1, and then check the condition again. If this condition is still true, it's going to go back in the block. After the block, it's going to be increasing j again, checking the condition. If it's still true, it's going to go in the block at the end, increase, check, well, etc. Until this becomes false, and then it's just going to be done executing the code. So at this point, let's just do something silly, console log, and then just specify the value for j like this. All right, so that's the for loop. And as you can imagine, it can also be nice to sometimes print all the values in an array. And we can do so using the for loop as well. But first, let's specify some array. And this is just going to be a very silly array containing a few numbers, because this is not requiring a lot of typing. And what I can do now, I can say for, and then I can say let k equals 0, because arrays, the index starts at 0. That's important here. As long as k is smaller than the length of the array, and this will work because remember, there's always one index less than we have length. So in this case, it's going to stop before we're going to try to access something that's not in the array. Then I can say increase the counter with 1. And then I can say something like this. Oh, well, I could say something like that, but that wouldn't work. This will. And then you can see I'm using a variable right now to access the elements of an array. And as you can see, it's printing all the variables of the array. Actually, it's quite easy to mess up here, honestly. And therefore, there's easier loops available to do this. So when we just want to show all the values of the array, we can use a special loop. And we can use the for of loop in order to do this. And this is what it looks like. Let's say we're going to reuse our array that I've just created. I can say for, and now I'm not specifying 3 blocks of code. I'm just going to say let elements, and then I'll say of our array. In this case, these are just numbers, and this element is just a name. I could have called this anything. Number would have also worked, but maybe just go for number. I can now just say here console log number. Maybe just also do the for of. In between, in front, you can see that I'm actually really in here. And this way, JavaScript is going to make sure I'll never get out of this loop. Sorry, I'll never get out of this array. So yes, I will get out of the loop. So it's going to do 2 things. Make sure I won't try to access elements that are not there. So I will access all the elements in the array, nothing that's not in there. And it's going to make sure I'll always get out of the loop. All right, I see some comments. Thank you, Streety, and we'll definitely get to this. I think maybe David even has a good link for you, but we'll get to this. It's a good question. Yes, so this is the for of loop. And well, just to be complete, let me also show you the for in loop, but you might actually need it less. So this of loop is going to grab the values of the array, and the in loop is going to grab the property. And the property for an array is just the index. So this is going to look a little silly, but let me just show you, just to be complete. Let's just say for let I in R, in R, just log it. So just this I, but maybe also just show you the value that's connected to it. There we go. So you can see that it's giving us the 0 for the index 0, 1, 12, 23, 6. And this looks a bit silly because the property of an array is 0, 1, 2, 3. But if I were to have an object, say I would have my person again, or well, something like it, just say name. And then I'm going to be, let me see if I can still copy this because I'm a bit lazy. So sometimes my laziness is inefficient because it actually takes more work or time to copy than it would to look it up and all that. But let's just go. I think this was still efficient. So if I were to do this in here, so say let's I in P, and then just only go to add and print eyes. This right. Oh, you can see that it has now printed the keys name, hobby, and age. And you may wonder, why do I need this? Well, we can use this key to actually access the value, and then we both have the key and the value on our side here. But this actually is telling us something about array as well. Not 100%, but you may actually feel like, maybe this is actually what's the deal with array. And because what's happening here is that the index is printed for the for in loop when we use arrays, but the key is printed when we use the for in loop for objects. And then arrays are actually objects beneath the surface. So you can just consider the index a sort of special key that we can use to access the values. Yes. So that's the for in loop. So we've seen the while loop, the regular for loop, the for off loop, and the for in loop. We have not seen the do while loop, but it's a lot like the while loop, and then it's always going to be executing it at least once. So I'm just going to leave that for now. So these are the loops that I wanted to show you. Let me go ahead and check the comment section if there's any comments coming up. Oh, there is actually a really good question here. It's about the useful JavaScript links. And then David had pointed out a very useful tip. So clearly the GitHub channel, it's also very useful. But this is a really good one because it helps so much if you want to have proper code examples and even production code examples. You just go on GitHub and look for repositories containing that language because you'll find so much code this way. Clearly, you'll find a lot of practice code, demonstration, but you also find some real projects that are out there and libraries that are being published on GitHub that you can just access, see what's happening. And this is an amazing resource to learn more about JavaScript. That's an excellent point. Thank you for that. And here you can find the GitHub that's connected to the book containing a lot of code examples. So all the concepts, but then like many, many more details. And also solutions to the exercises. So that might also be very helpful. So let's see if there are any other questions at this point. Because if not, then I'm going to be posting the exercises on the Discord channel for you to use. And actually some bigger exercises than last time. So this might actually be quite a struggle to work on. So maybe I can briefly present the exercises so you know what I'm talking about. So this first exercise is about the if statement. And it's just going to be printing different ticket prices based on different ages. And then if you've seen the if else statement or you get it back, you can probably quite easily do this. So this one is still quite alright, I would say. Then this one gets more interesting already. So we're going to be combining our knowledge of while loops with the arrays. So I say list here, but actually I mean array. So I'm going to be modifying this a little, but I just want you to combine your knowledge of loops and arrays. Then next, oh, and actually also for if statements. So there's a lot in there. And next, and this is actually quite a challenging exercise. It could take you really long. So I don't expect you to finish this in like 20 minutes or something. It's well possible this takes you over an hour to do this. But you're going to write a game that takes some sort of number, and then this number is going to be guessed by the user. So for this time, you could, for example, just program it directly yourself or look up how to get a random number using JavaScript in Google, And then the user can prompt an answer, and then you can check whether it's correct or not. And then there's all these bonuses, but if you can do this, you're really combining your knowledge of different types of variables and loops and if statements really well into an actual program that's doing something. And as always, if you have any questions, go ahead, ask them now or later via the Discord channel. Let me just remove this and check the Discord channel. All right. If nothing comes up within, well, say the next minute or so, I'm going to be ending this live session, but you can find me over on Discord. Um, and there, if you get stuck with your exercises, go ahead and let me know. Also, the exercise will be uploaded there in, well, the next minute or so. That's okay. I'm over on Discord. Next week, we're actually going to be running a little mini app already using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So then it's going to be real fun. We're really going to be producing something that the front end user, so someone accessing the web browser, can use as well. Have a lovely Saturday.